Welcome to the Digital Enterprise Society podcast, addressing all aspects of the digital enterprise, inspiring connection without boundaries and creation without limits. Thank you for tuning in. Here are your hosts, Thom Singer and Craig Brown.
Well, hello, and welcome back to, or if it's your first time, welcome to the Digital Enterprise Society podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in to this show. We put this podcast together so that it could be a resource for those who work in and around PLM. The Digital Enterprise Society, it is the forum for the exchange of ideas surrounding the tools, processes, and practices used across the product lifecycle. For more information, visit digitalenterprisesociety.org. So my name is Thom Singer, and I have the honor to co-host this show every single week with Craig Brown. Craig is an industry veteran and former PLM leader at General Motors. Hey, Craig, how are you today?
I'm great, Thom. Looking forward to our interview. It's a bit of a blast from the past. It'll be interesting.
I was going to say, I like it when we have guests back. It's kind of like old friend day here on the Digital Enterprise Society podcast. And every single week, Craig and I try to bring to the show interesting interviews and other ideas that are going to help all the listeners enhance and grow their careers. And today we have 3 graduate students from Purdue who are all getting master's degrees in PLM. We have them back to the show. They were actually with us in January of this year, but I want all the listeners to think for a second. Remember January of 2020? I don't think any of us knew what 2020 had in store, and I certainly know that our 3 young friends did not think that their year at school was going to be the way it was. They went through a lot of changes, as did all of us, so we thought it would be fun to bring them back and talk a little bit about what's going on with their degree process, what changed, what they did all year, and find out where they're going now as they get down to the wire and start thinking about looking for jobs. So we have with us today Soho Yun, Kevin Del Rey, and Eric Kozikowski. Welcome back, guys, to the Digital Enterprise Society podcast.
Thanks for having us back.
So it's good that you guys are sitting in a room together. How long have you been allowed to do that? I'm just curious, because a lot of us, at least up here where I live, we still work from home, so everything's a Zoom, and we're doing this with Zoom, but you guys are able to sit together, so that's kind of cool. How long have you been able to do that? Have you been that way throughout, or is this a recent development in your part of the country?
For us, at least, it's been throughout. We never, at least on Purdue's front, they sent most of the students home, but graduate students like us, our lab didn't shut down. We didn't stop coming to work. We've kind of just been in the lab every day, doing our jobs. They make us wear masks every day.
I was going to say, I do want to let everybody know we can see them on video through Zoom. All of them have big masks on covering their face, so they are being safe.
Yeah, and Purdue required everybody to get a corona test before they came back to campus, and we never left. We took a test as well. Everyone turned out negative. But yeah, we've just been here. We've all been in the same space. I know Indiana, at least right now, is in the process, I think, of completely opening back up. But for the past few months, they've been operating at like half capacity with restaurants and different venues like that.
Yeah, the numbers, they change all the time, but this metric called a positivity rate is something that we're all learning to watch a little more closely. And it's interesting how it oscillates, right? And it has a lot to do with, one event, and as we've all been hearing in the news, one event can end up being a spreader event, which is really quite terrifying. So it's cool that you guys can still get together and work together. I think one of the challenges in this time is a lot of us are used to working together, especially in any kind of product development, and doing that all remotely is a challenge. And I'm kind of curious from each of your points of view, how did what you guys are doing in your studies have to change as a result of all of this? I mean, not everything we do in PLM is virtual. So I guess ladies first, to Soho, could you describe to us what changed in the past 6 months, 8 months?
I would say the transition from a physical workplace to a virtual one. But I think it was a smoother transition for us in particular because we already had implemented virtual ways of working, such as having access to remote desktops before the whole pandemic began. So it was an easier transition for us to work at home or wherever we are. For me, I went back home to South Korea for a few months, and I still had access to my workstation all the way out in West Lafayette, Indiana. It was an eye-opening experience to see how we are all able to quickly adapt to the situation and find ways to make it work. Also, what changed for me would be that I decided to take some more time to finish my master's studies and find more accommodating options when testing with human subjects. So I'm in the process of redesigning my research testing so that it reduces physical contact and geared towards optimized virtual methods.
Interesting. That's fascinating. We'll come back to that.
Yeah.
Eric, what about you? What changed?
So it's more so kind of a physical shift to trying to be, more cautious of, and what Soho mentioned, cautious of your when you're doing your research methods and usability testing, usability studies, is how do we keep everyone involved here at the lab and anyone that we bring into the lab safe? That's kind of been our biggest shift is safety is our priority, and especially with Protect Purdue kind of going on. Protect Purdue is Purdue's movement, I guess, towards COVID to kind of protect against COVID. And so we've been abiding by their guidelines and social distancing. So that's kind of been the harder aspect, is adjusting to what Soho mentioned, the virtual aspect of it, right? Virtual meetings, talking to everybody virtually. Is like me, I prefer talking face to face. I can feel out the room. I can understand what my test subjects are talking or what they're feeling, if they're comfortable with what they're doing versus are they just agreeing with me, right?
Well,
that's kind of been the biggest.
And Eric, that's one of the things we notice all the time is, so much of our communication is not verbal. It's actually eye contact and body gestures and so on. And that's been really difficult in this world. Now, we've been doing podcasts for over a year and it's all audio, but as you know, we all can see each other as we do these things. We just don't publish the videos because we've all forgotten how to dress, right? But well, you guys haven't. But Thom and I, we're a little more casual than we used to be.
I do wear pants.
I don't want to know.
So Eric, I want to ask you, talk about the initiative of Protect Purdue. The news has been very forthcoming that a lot of colleges have sucked at stopping the spread of the disease on campus. And I have a college freshman who is at an Ivy League school, and they basically have locked them into a little bubble, and they've done a good job. They haven't had a lot of cases at all because they tested them before they came. They've all been tested 4 times in the first 3 weeks or whatever. How do you feel it's going there at your campus?
I believe it's going pretty well. I know cases, as you would expect, are going up, but not at an alarming rate or any rate that would be, unimaginable. Some of the good things Purdue is doing is they're doing retesting of students, like you mentioned. So other universities are doing as well. Every week there's a random selection.
I think it's 10% of the student body every week.
Yep, is getting tested. Purdue is really taking social distancing to kind of a next level. With any event over, I believe it's 6 people that aren't allowed by the university or are not following their guidelines, students have been suspended out of school for and had asked to leave campus.
Having house parties.
Yeah, house parties. Yeah. Even if they're off campus, they've been asked to leave for that. Even with sorry.
Oh, no, you're fine. Continue.
I was going to say with class schedules, they've even shifted away from all in-person class. It's half and half, essentially, where they'll do every other day is in person and every other day is virtual.
Interesting. I applaud Purdue for having a program. And then for each of you, when you get out into industry, that might be one thing to look for as you're interviewing with companies do they have an organized program? The really good ones do, right? And as we talk about industries that are doing okay during this time, some of them, it fluctuates because they've had an impact on their workforce, but in fact, the demands for their products haven't gone down, and we'll talk a little bit about that in a second. But I'm glad they have a program. I'm glad you guys are there. It's good to see your faces. Kevin, how about you? What changed?
Well, for starters, no one expected it to happen, but I had planned originally to have most of my thesis work done in the summer and the fall. Like this fall, be hopefully getting out of here, but I won't be getting out of here until the spring. but we literally it was a turn on a dime. Everyone was doing thesis work. We were preparing for our testbed launch. When's that going to happen? I don't know, but that got shoved to the side. We just immediately turned and just straight into producing PPE, whether it's we made gowns out of Tyvek, so it looked like people were repping Home Depot. It's kind of funny. Shields, ventilators, you name it. We started making parts for whatever.
We talked with Dr. Hartman a while ago, but remind everybody, who were your customers? Who was that for? Was it a particular industry or just general purpose?
So we had a couple different groups. We had a few hospitals with Franciscans.
Local hospitals.
Yeah, local hospitals. A couple veterinary offices, dental offices. Purdue obviously wanted to have a stockpile of PPE for their own use. We had the fire department come in to make adapters for their fire masks so they could use HEPA filters instead of relying on oxygen tanks. We had to design hazmat adapters for hospitals because their hoods were all different designs and didn't work together.
And of course, face shields and glasses and masks.
Mm-hmm. I thought it was interesting when we interviewed Dr. Hartman, and this was back in April. So this was that turn on the dime that you all went through. It was turning on the dime, like when we interviewed him for the show. And what I found so interesting in that interview was he said that there were like 6 different departments who were totally unrelated throughout both Purdue's main campus and some others, who all pulled together, and he listed them off. And one of them, he said, was the drama department. And I was like, how does the drama department get involved? And he said costume design, because we were making gowns, and they were the ones who knew how to sew and make the gowns, etc. It blew me away in a positive manner that you guys really pulled together a lot of different talent at Purdue.
So what did you guys learn about collaboration? What was the key to being able to turn on the dime?
Communication is key.
But how do you do that if you're socially distanced or isolated?
That's the trick.
Well, that was, we had, since every lab essentially was completely separated, we rarely interacted together. I think the only times we ever directly interacted was making pickups when we would go and get whatever they had made. But we'd have Microsoft Teams meetings. We'd have a whole Fusion 360 site.
And that kind of bounces off the PLM aspect of version control. So we had a few different labs that were designing different fixtures and different components.
Yeah, there was a couple problems with, I would say, just organization, where we would come up, or not necessarily us, but we would the group would decide on a kind of design we were going to go with for one of these products. But then another team would want to improve on it and would just kind of go their own way without really reporting to anybody.
Yep.
So the issue we kind of had with versioning is you'd run into, which one's the right one? This one from a while ago, which everyone agreed on, or this new one, which just came out from one of the teams.
Yep.
Yeah. So of course, the new one has some positive attribute. That's why you want it.
Yeah.
But then everybody else has to get up to speed, right? So interesting. So when you guys get around to interviewing and finding your job outside of the university, make sure you point out this whole sequence, because it's real life. I mean, an ability to collaborate cross-functionally, and an ability to deal with version control. I mean, it's kind of basic stuff, but it's amazing how many companies really don't do it very well. And then just being agile, right? I mean, the key to success probably in life, especially right now, is being flexible and being agile. And sounds like you guys have done that well. Soho, for a moment, you said it, but let's emphasize it a bit. So you're from Korea, South Korea, right?
Well, my family's from South Korea, so all my parents and my extended family live there currently.
So you were able to go back there for a bit in the spring or thereabouts?
In the spring, I was. My parents are concerned about my well-being here.
Especially the way the Americans handle it first. I bring this up because I was about ready to go to Korea and Japan to give some speeches.
Really?
And this was back in April, March. And it was literally the last day of February, I guess it was, now that I think about it, that they canceled it. And it was more the government canceled it because we weren't flying between the countries, right? And so it was really interesting to compare. Every month we would talk about, okay, when are we going to do the visit? And South Korea especially did a really good job, into the summer. And then to be honest, I haven't paid attention, but certainly into early summer. And over here, the various cities, Detroit included, had a real problem. I guess I'm wondering, what insights can you share with all of us that are listening about what's really worked well and frankly what hasn't worked so well as we've gone through this phase of our lives?
Well, I would say the first thing I've noticed when I arrived in Korea is that everybody needs to have a phone application installed in their phones that has a GPS tracker of where you are real time. So this is required for everyone entering this country because you are required to be in quarantine in an enclosed space for 2 weeks, and they would track you for those 2 weeks and check your temperature twice a day. And if you have any movement of your location, they will call you or actually visit you in person to check if you're all right or not. I think that's a great way to track the spread and each individual and who they contact. So this was a good technology to gather all the information together to track down the originated place or person.
Yeah.
So I thought that was a good program that they did. I'm not sure about other countries. I think it depends on their privacy laws or.
Well, that's part of it, as well as this whole point about especially Americans, we're very much adamant about liberty, right, and independence, and not being spied on. And the trouble with contact tracing technology, it also can be used to track you unfairly. And we actually have there's a phrase in our Constitution about illegal search and seizure, and taken literally, contact tracing would be against that. And so I think that's part of what we've struggled with in the United States is while that would be really good for the health of the country and the health of individuals, it's not so good when it comes to your privacy, your independence. And so you're right. And, Germany is kind of in between the two, and they, to their credit, the citizen, and this is kind of into the spring, right? Their citizens accepted that they needed to do contact tracing, right? It's interesting right now, if you read what's going on, so we're in the fall of 2020, well, they're starting to see surges like the United States is seen in pockets. And I think it's a completely different problem, which is people are getting restless, right? They're getting tired of being sequestered. So what and I don't want to put you on the spot, but I am curious, what's the most negative thing you've seen comparing the two places you've been, South Korea and the United States in Indiana?
Other than the country difference, there was a difference between being in a metropolitan area and being in somewhat rural area like West Lafayette. So
well, yeah, and especially for everybody's benefit, your lab is out at the edge of town anyways, right? You're in a cornfield almost, literally.
Pretty much.
So interesting. So yeah, please finish. I'm sorry.
Oh yeah. So in metropolitan areas like Seoul, Korea, everybody has access to everything, and if one thing closes down, people tend to be in panic if it's closed down more than a few days. But that has been the case in this pandemic of things closing down, like bars, restaurants, and other places. I think keeping people who are cleared out of quarantine controlled, because as soon as they're cleared out, we wouldn't be tracing them through apps, because I don't think, they just don't find a reason to track everyone down after they're cleared. And it's people have been gathering, and like young people have been gathering in places they were not allowed to, and there were businesses opening up, not following the guidelines, and that would be the most negative thing that I've experienced in Korea, at least.
I don't think it's people are ignorant. In some cases they might be, but I think in general it's this, we as humans, even our discussion here today, we're at least able to interact, right? See each other, hear each other. We miss that. And the more we stay sequestered, the more we get a little bit frayed, right? And we need to find ways to still do the social interaction. I didn't know when we set this up a couple of days ago, I didn't know if you guys would be in your house, your home, meaning your parents' home, or there at the center. And it's kind of cool to me that you're at the center and figuring out how to manage the pandemic, right? Or keeping people safe. So that's really cool. So interesting. So what advice would you have for the listeners out there that maybe each of you give me one bit of advice about how do you manage through this? And in addition to how you manage through this, how's it changed your perspective about what profession you want to, what niche of PLM you want to pursue when you finish your work there? So Kevin, you want to go first?
Sure. I'll go first. Just kind of surviving or getting through this whole situation, for me at least, I've tried harder to keep in contact with people, really.
Oh,
it's mainly been family, close family, friends. If I can't see them on a daily basis, I'll give them a call. I'll send them a funny image I found or something. Just try and keep in contact with them. And I think that's important to do as well with kind of company connections too. See how people are handling. See how each individual partner you work with or a supplier is handling themselves. If it's going well, if they need help, because this isn't a thing where it's just going to fix itself overnight. This is going to be a challenge once everything's back up and running, that we can get back to a sense of normalcy. Because if you're going to have these companies closing because they can't have their employees there, or if they can't operate because of these guidelines, there's going to be a ton of problems. And I think keeping the line of communication open is very key for that. For me personally, it's just been with friends and family, but I could see how it would expand to the kind of corporate setting.
Well, and I just kind of want to add one thing to that. I think it's so important for everybody, no matter what your age, whether you're, a graduate student or whether you're a senior person in a company or everything in between, that whole point of taking action and reaching out to people is really, I think, the secret weapon for your career and stuff going forward, because so many people aren't doing it. So many people feel isolated and feel alone, and they're not taking the initiative to reach out. So when you reach out and tell somebody, hey, I'm just checking in, this is a tough time for all of us, that scores, proverbial points, if you will. People will remember that you're the one who reached out and checked in on them, so to speak.
Yeah, that's a good point.
That's excellent advice for me.
Hey, Eric. I'm sorry, Kevin. Go ahead and finish.
Oh, sorry. I was just going to say, in the PLM sense, once I finally get my degree, not honestly sure. I've had a lot of fun kind of designing basic systems to be used here. I helped design a system to be used by students, so maybe something in the implementation side of these huge systems.
But in a moment, we're going to talk about industries that are hiring, and I think there's some surprises there, but we'll do that next. So, Kevin, how about you? What are you thinking?
Eric.
Eric. I'm sorry, Eric.
So a couple things. One, foremost, is respect each other's space.
Especially now.
Yeah. So it's that and following, the CDC guideline just to get through this. And what Kevin says, this is not going to go away overnight. And then once we do finally get in the clear, flu season is going to come back, cold season comes back. So how do we down the road identify what is really the Rona, what's just the flu, and how do we counteract that? Yeah. And then as far as from a business aspect is adapt. Times are different, times are continuously changing, and they will continue to change. So if you're in a workforce, how do we adapt to this, and how do we continue to prosper our business with maybe like a restaurant, for example, expanding out to more delivery options? Like, I don't know if you guys remember a couple of years ago, most of the fast food, let's talk about Wendy's, McDonald's, they didn't do delivery.
No. And
now all these businesses like Grubhub, Uber Eats have kind of swooped in and helped everybody out in that aspect. And smaller businesses hopped on that train as well, which is fantastic because it helped them through the pandemic. And then I think, Craig, you mentioned the RV business. another thing, right? Is RVs.
That's one we're going to talk about shortly.
Yeah, and that was a fantastic example because I've actually, I'm part of on Facebook and on social media as well. All these groups for traveling, and then as well as like off-roading. I'm big into off-roading vehicles, and specifically a Toyota Tacoma, but that's my little plug.
Okay.
But nonetheless, all these groups have been posting of how they're traveling, how they're working from their pickup trucks. They've put custom campers on these trucks and built up these fabulous, interiors just so they can work from the Grand Canyon, from the East Coast, West Coast. It's quite fabulous.
Yeah, and if this develops into a market, it has, by the way. Well, they need PLM as much as anybody, and partly because they're smaller companies that their price of entry into the big PLM that a large company would use, or even a large university would use. Maybe they're just not ready to do that, right? They can quickly cobble something together in their workbenches and in their small manufacturing. Why would they bother with all this virtual stuff? Well, now. Your interest there. I mean, what's working well for these road warriors that are no longer road warriors because they like the freedom? They're road warriors because that's where it's safe, and yet that they need to be able to still get their job done. So, Soho, how about you? What's this? What have you learned, and what do you want to apply? And then what's it doing in terms of your career aspirations? You were the chemist originally, as I recall. Is that right?
Yes, I was. My freshman year.
Don't we need PLM to kill COVID? I mean, I'm just thinking about it.
Well, my main takeaways are that communication is extremely important, especially using business organization platforms like Microsoft Teams or Slack. It was extremely helpful for me, especially working remotely. And down the road, I think when I'm looking for jobs, I'm potentially looking for jobs in the implementation consulting field. That's going to involve a lot of client interactions. And if something like this happens ever again in my life, I would be more prepared and well suited for the job, because I would keep in mind to have everything online or in my local file, and keeping all my communications through different platforms. And I know how it's important to, as you said, reach out and take initiative. I think I'll be more prepared for that in that situation in the future.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about where's the future jobs for just a second. So it seems to me there's two areas that have really weathered this economic storm quite well. One is the people who provide the tools and the software. And, there's some startups that are doing quite well, but even like Microsoft and Teams, you brought up Teams, Teams, gosh darn it, everybody thought Microsoft wasn't in the game when it came to these kinds of tools, the collaboration tools and so on. And I tell you what, of all the experiences I've been having, Teams is pretty good. Now Zoom, they just hit it at exactly the right time, and then they got kind of overwhelmed with the security stuff, and they're doing okay. We're using Zoom today in this broadcast, but so software. If you had the inkling to be the integrator or the builder of the tools, I think those job prospects are not going away anytime soon. The big shift from a computer in your hands, and what I really mean is a desktop or a mainframe computer that you own, to something cloud-based. We touched on this 8-9 months ago. I really think this whole situation has escalated that. And guess what? Amazon and Microsoft are and the others, they're really playing the game well. Providing services for simulation, services for PLM, services for all in the cloud. And so the other guys, the Arises and the Siemens and the Dassaults, they're trying to figure out, which one do we play with, or do we play with them all? And, the boundary of who's benefiting most from the tool vendor's point of view and the service vendor's point of view keeps changing. And I don't think that's going to change. It's only accelerating is the point I want to make. The pandemic has accelerated it because people need to work remotely. So that's the tool side. The industry side is really interesting. And you just got to think about, okay, we're all working quasi-independently. We're together at the moment, some of us virtual, some of us in the same room. But in order to do work, we got to ask ourselves, well, who provides, the conference room you're in, or the productive equipment, or this whole the recreational vehicle industry is turning into the remote office industry. And to me, it's just amazing. We were reading an article this morning about the backlog is like 19 months now, and it's never that good in the RV industry, right? Now, here's another interesting conundrum. A lot of RVs are built in Canada. Well, Canada and the United States are not shipping very much across the border at the moment for health reasons, right? And so you guys are in Indiana, right up the road, up in the northern Indiana. There's all kinds of RV manufacturers that can't keep up, right? Because there's so much demand, whether it's a simple trailer or whether it's something with a motor in it. So it's interesting to me how those industries are changing. And I wondered, you guys have all kinds of partners from big companies like Cummins to the smaller companies. Are you seeing any other industries that are really benefiting from the pandemic because there's just so much demand for their products? And I thought they might have shown up in your lab. Yeah, let's hear about them.
Kind of building off that, this is a little tangential to that. Eric has some better direct examples. I was going to say that a lot of people, especially in pretty much every industry, have now experienced working remotely. A lot of people hadn't done that before, and I think a lot of people, from what I've seen and heard on like the news and the internet, is that a lot of them actually like being able to have that option to work remote. Now, maybe it's not every day, you're not at home every day, but having that option to continue working from home if you have a sick relative or a young one or something that needs to be done. I think that whole expanse has just been cracked open, and I don't think we're going to go back to everybody working in an office. I think a lot of companies are going to have to explore either being able to provide their employees with the things they would need, whether it be a work computer or a microphone or a camera, into their home space, or to have these kind of office spaces scattered around the country where you wouldn't need a huge office complex, but just kind of a small rented area where you can have those setups for these remote work cells, I guess. Either way I would say it.
Other industries, either of you, do you see other industries that are benefiting from the pandemic?
Yeah, so not necessarily partners at the center themselves, but as sports equipment. I mean, if you try going to purchase a new bicycle right now, good luck.
Really?
Oh yeah, because it's it's a better mobility device.
Yeah,
right?
in fact,
or weight. I mean, we have a good friend of ours who's big into fitness and weightlifting. He says you can't purchase new weights anywhere. I mean, all these manufacturers are backlogged because.
So expand on that. Why did that happen?
Well, and then just kind of to add to that, and it's going to kind of come all together, is lumber. I mean, as well as treated lumber, anything. And I only know this just because I'm currently going through a home renovation. So I was trying to purchase 2x4s, just basic 2x4s, and I had one heck of a time trying to find anything. But nonetheless, people have more time at home. So they're working from home, they're staying at home, so they develop their home gyms. People are taking on more home projects, more home renos. That's kind of where I've also seen a big jump in that. People are spending more time at home, so people want to make their home as comfortable as possible and kind of tailor it.
And the sporting equipment thing, for Father's Day back in June, my wife and daughters got me an inflatable kayak because all the places you could rent a kayak and stuff were closed, and there wasn't a lot of activities one could do. And so, but it took 6 weeks for that inflatable kayak from Amazon to actually arrive because they were back ordered.
Wow.
For so long.
Mm-hmm.
So it's interesting.
Even for electronics, I just recently purchased a new laptop, and it took me to get the laptop around 5 weeks off of Apple US.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And
part of that was Apple in particular, they had, they do a lot of manufacturing in China, and they had trouble getting subsystems, pieces, boards and such that over here.
That would be the main reason.
Good point. Because a lot of these manufacturers are also bringing manufacturing back for that very reason.
There you go. I hope you were going to say that, because to me, PLM people were thinking, well, we're kind of done, right? At least at a big company, we're kind of like, oh yeah, we did it all. We don't need to do it anymore. Well, if you're bringing it back over, if you're no longer outsourcing the part, which is typical in the car business, but you're doing it yourself, well, there's all kinds of stuff you need. Not only if literally if you're making it all yourself. So like, GM hasn't made it a secret. They're building a big battery plant in northern Ohio, akin to competing with Tesla and those guys who've got a big battery plant in Nevada, right? So they're making their own batteries. Not that long ago, nobody would have dreamed of that. They would have been buying a battery probably from somebody in Asia, and now they're all making them here. So keep your eyes open, everybody, because industries that are vertically integrating for robustness reasons are going to be doing more manufacturing within the borders of the state or even the borders of the country.
But
that's something to pay attention to.
Here's an interesting question for all of you, since you are all 7-8 months away or whatever it is now until May, and you're in your last year. As you look for those jobs, are you worried about the economy? What do you think the future looks like, and what do you have to do now to prepare to be ready to go to work come May?
I think absolutely kind of the economy plays a role in it, especially the industry you go into. Right now, if you wanted to go into aerospace industry, aerospace isn't doing too hot, especially it started off pre-COVID with Boeing's MAX-E issues.
The 787 MAX or whatever.
Yeah. And then once
the old one. That's a lesson in don't keep using old technology, but let's not go there. We'll offend some of our Boeing friends.
And then, and then airplanes right now, a lot of airlines.
Air travel just stopped.
Oh, yeah.
So it's really, it hit the industry hard.
Stopped it slow.
Yeah. So that's kind of one area of the industry that's got hit hard by COVID. And
if your goal was to be the PLM guy for the commercial airplane business, I would tell you to reconsider. Right?
Yeah.
A good friend of mine who is at Boeing is on the defense side, and he's made this observation, and he'll probably retire soon, but he's made this observation. Defense spending is actually up. So when you say, avoid aerospace, well, be really clear, avoid commercial aircraft, right? And it's just like cars when there's a downturn or an uptick in oil prices or a downturn in consumer interest in buying cars. You really don't want to be left holding a bunch of cars on your lots, right, that you manufactured and you can't sell. Well, commercial aircraft is going to be in that same boat. But there's other industries, think about the economy the other way. We just talked about a couple that have this huge backlog. Backlog's a great thing. That's jobs. That's consistency. What probably is hurting is people aren't going to the sub shop at break, right? They're packing their own lunch, right? And instead they're buying, kitchen appliances to help make lunch. And so the economy as a whole, it's going to have to change. No doubt. It's already changed, right? But will there be jobs for people in PLM? I think there will be, absolutely. And I think you just got to keep your eyes open. And I wanted to kind of push Soho a bit. I think chemistry needs PLM. They're doing, well, here's what I mean. They're doing experiments right now, simulations of how mutations are occurring in the virus. And of course, they're using the same HPC that we would use to simulate structural fatigue in a mechanical part, right? So they're exploring thousands of variants of, well, what if it morphs this way, or what if it morphs that way? And the reason they're doing this is they're trying to, build the next serum, the next vaccine for when this thing morphs, because it will keep morphing, right? I mean, that's just the way biology is. Yeah. And so my point is, well, how do you organize all the experiments and keep track of it and keep version control and all that stuff? PLM has that figured out. Right? I mean, you just got to do it.
Very interesting point to look into. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think you got some there in Indiana. I mean, whether it's the Lilly folks or a couple of the other big drug companies, they've got people thinking about this, and so you might want to dig into that. Any other last thoughts on Thom's question about economic impacts or economic adjustments? I would call it. Are you worried about finding the jobs?
Not super worried.
I am worried. You're not
Well,
worried?
I'm not worried. I'm obviously nervous. I mean, interviewing is a nerve-wracking experience. Just looking for a job is a nerve-wracking experience in general. But I'm not worried per se. I don't think it'll be like I'm not going to find a job. It might not be my ideal job at the time, but I think I'd be able to find a job.
Well, you guys said it earlier, be flexible, right? You just went through this in March and April, and so just keep your wits about you.
So we've all been, perusing through the job market and kind of be it LinkedIn, Monster, or what.
Yeah.
And it was right when the pandemic started. It was kind of interesting to see how there was, 20 pages of jobs for be a design engineer, product lifecycle manager, along those lines. And then all of a sudden, all that dwindled down to maybe a page or two.
Yeah.
Right.
So that was at that point where I was like, I kind of started getting a little nervous. Like, I was like, maybe this is going to be a lot harder than I thought.
Yeah, I've noticed in their filter options in those job searching websites, they now have, I don't know if they already had it, but they have a remote work option.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
So if you click it, you'll see more options now than before, I guess, pandemic started.
Oh, that's
So
that's probably very true. Is there's probably a lot more jobs that aren't geographically tied than there were a year ago.
Yeah. And that kind of concerns me over metropolitan area. Sorry, tongue twister. Like downtown, like say downtown Chicago, a lot of these offices are closing currently, and moving to remote work, and they're permanently selling their
Their space,
their spaces, canceling their leases. So downtown Chicago has kind of become a ghost town almost in some respects. And I'm assuming
And I think you just got to be flexible. I mean, if your goal in life is to live in a metropolitan area like Chicago, so there's a lot of good attractions, right? Then buy an RV if you can get one. Buy a used RV. Right? And my point is, that's just going to be where you live for 2 years, wherever you find the job. And then when normalcy returns, I'm not sure it'll ever be normal again in the restaurant industry, by the way. However, other industries, products, the kind of products that we're talking about and use, they'll still be there. There's still a need for them. There may be a shakeout, but specific niches you might want to avoid, like commercial aircraft. But other niches will be really important. And the ability to use computers to make better decisions for product development or even services, that's not going away. And the education you guys have gotten is really important. You just may not look for, you were looking for job titles and you're talking about 6 pages. You might want to find computer assisted decision making. Well, at the core of that is PLM. So other kinds of companies, from drug companies to RV manufacturers, I think you want to take a look. So,
well, and there could be a listener out there right now whose company is hungry for really good, well-educated, ingenuity-driven talent, and they would have to look up Soho Yun, Kevin Del Rey, and Eric Kozikowski.
And Craig's not interested because I did my time. I'm having fun having interviews with kids like this. So, anyways, it's been great to catch up with you guys. Please stay in touch. We might have to check with you in April to see how we're doing. Right by then, a whole bunch of new things will happen. And goodness, I'm pleased as punch you're getting tested, so you know where you're at. Right. I think testing is one of these things we've been way underdoing, and because of my age and because I live way out in the country, I've yet to be tested. I don't need to be, right? And it's just one of these things, everybody. We need to know where we're at, and then we need to use science to make better decisions. So, Thom, back to you.
Well, again, thank you to the three of you for coming back and having a conversation. I think that, people like you, graduate students and undergrads and people just out of college, you're the future of the industry. So getting your insights, I think, is really important to what we try to do here. And to everybody who's tuning in, come back every single week because you want to join us for more thoughts, ideas, and information in and around product lifecycle management. The Digital Enterprise Society, it is the place for the exchange of ideas around digital manufacturing tools. Go check us out at digitalenterprisesociety.org.
You've been listening to the Digital Enterprise Society podcast. Learn more about what you've heard here today at digitalenterprisesociety.org. Join us again next week for more Connection Without Boundaries.